Hi, my name is Billy and this is the Diginauts show, and today I want to discuss Supergiant's new game Pyre and sports games in general. But before we get to that, I want to take a small look at their older titles. Supergiant are well known for their previous games Bastion and Transistor, both of which marry great world building, story and music. Bastion is an action game in which it uses this basic combat as a gameplay tool to take you through a beautiful world, but Transistor is where it gets interesting. It allows you to slow down the pace with the ability to pause combat at any times and queue up your attacks that you want to use in order. This changes the combat of the game massively, making it much more strategy focused, giving you time to think and prioritise, and is mechanically much more satisfying for me. Both of which are really worth playing as games, with the worlds being rich, the music beautiful and the stories interesting. Honestly, they are some of my favourite games of all time and come highly recommended. But Pyre is their new release and it mixes things up completely, which, considering the mechanical differences between Bastion and Transistor, it's not too much of a surprise, having already shown that they can change it up mechanically with their sequel. And this time we have a visual novel sports game. I'll be honest, the initial comparison of Pyre to a sports game is not my own, but after hearing this and thinking about it, I just cannot seem to escape the idea, and this is something that I want to dive into and explore a little bit. Simply put, sports games usually bore me to death, and I had a bloody good time with Pyre. The basic outline for the story is simple. In a world where reading is outlawed, you are exiled from the Commonwealth for doing so. The only way back is to take part in an ancient game known as the Rites, where the winning team will be able to send one person back, all previous transgressions forgiven. To do this, you have to explore a world of exiles, the downside, a hugely variable landscape with intensity of colour and uniqueness that is truly uncommon in games. Each of these areas has its own people that live there, with these weird worms and a tree-like humanoid species, and in each of these areas you have to perform these rites. The rites themselves are probably the most comparable to a sports game like basketball, with you having to get the orb into the opponent's pyre, which is similar to a net, which causes damage, with the aim to get their opponent down to 0 health. Only one player for each side can move at a time, and they have an aura around them that will banish an opponent if they touch it. If you carry the orb, you lose your aura, leaving you defenceless, but you can fire the aura at an opposing player to banish them when you do not have the orb. More mechanics do get added as you play, but this is a rough outline, and the reason I wanted to explore these in so much detail is because they present a similar rule set not too far away from a sports game. I mean, you think about FIFA or Rocket League and you can see some similarities that could be presented as gameplay choices. If you look into sports and the actual definition of them, it goes something like this: an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. When you break down most modern sports, they are just rule sets devised to maintain a fair competition between two parties. They are abstractions in themselves, passed through time, probably from a couple of people sort of getting competitive with each other, establishing a basic rule set and evolving it as time goes on. And as they do evolve, they've become monumental, stadium-filling pastimes for millions, not too dissimilar to how mods were created and then spawned into games like Dota, which are now themselves stadium-filling entertainment for millions. And one clear place that games draw inspiration from is life. With the first video game basically being an abstraction of tennis, it makes sense that there have been many sports games through the ages. In the early days there were more arcadey games, by which I mean they were designed to give you the impression of the experience of playing a sport, but not to exactly match the rules. Computers simply did not have the power to simulate every aspect of a sport. I would like to state that these are games that I'm not too familiar with, but this is the impression that I've got after doing some research. But as consoles and computers got more powerful, they managed to create something that was much more of a facsimile to the real experience of a sport, or the feeling of playing a sport at least. I could not tell you the exact ins and outs between FIFA 2016 and 17, but the one thing I can tell you is a key element of modern sports games is the wish fulfillment or fantasy fulfillment, as many games do. Don't get me wrong, this is not the only aspect in modern sports games, a competitive side for one, but I can see how my little brother's endless rounds on FIFA are not too dissimilar to my hundreds of hours into oblivion at a similar age. But this fantasy of being a famous athlete or taking my team to a league is just not one that I find personally engaging. I don't follow any sports, therefore I do not play FIFA or Madden. I just couldn't give a shit. But then I play a sports game like Pyre and I find myself completely absorbed. I play Rocket League from the edge of my seat, mini cheering every time I clear a ball or score a goal. What makes these games work for me but not playing FIFA? I think it's twofold really, mechanics and settings. For mechanics, you could easily look at a Rocket League and dismiss it as just a football game with cars, but a few mechanical choices are just preferable to me. For instance, the way the ball and cars are more physics driven. You do not just press a button to shoot, but you have to try and direct it with the body of your car, and adding 2 or 3 more mechanics that seem relatively simple but have some complexity to them is just rewarding to me to learn and engage with. I don't doubt that people who play sports games get the similar sort of feeling from them. I am just talking purely from a preference. I prefer the mechanics in a Rocket League. I think it comes back to this abstract idea of it being more arcadey, easy and quick to play, given the thrills of winning and losing, but not being wrapped up in a reality-based fantasy. But then there is this fantasy that can be given by games. In FIFA, it can be taking your team from the lowliest league up to the very best of the best. It can be imagining yourself on the pitch becoming the next big thing in football. Sports are a big part of your life, and this is huge for you. I can imagine that for people who live and breathe it, then this is fucking awesome. But it's not for me, and it's not why I play games. It is to get transported to elsewhere. I previously stated that each of Supergiant's games have a fully featured world, and this is no different in Pyre. And being absorbed in this world for 11-12 hours it took me to complete the game was a huge amount of fun. The initial road trip across the world to being able to explore sections more freely later. It was the winning, it was getting to know the people on my team and helping them achieve their freedom. It was the stakes involved. This sort of fantasy and these sort of stories and places is a big reason why I play games, but the hobby of video games is big enough for both this and the FIFA fantasy. I suppose what I'm trying to say is my name is Billy and I like some sports games, and I would not have thought about it in this amount of depth if it wasn't for Pyre.